What criticisms does Nation of Islam have towards Christianity? I mean, they've criticized everything. But their criticism sometimes, if I'm honest, there are times when the Nation of Islam gives, I would say, viable criticisms. But they don't realize that they're criticizing Western Christianity, not biblical Christianity. When I say Western Christianity, what do I mean? It's that form of Christianity that was culturally captive to Christendom or Constantinianism. When Constantine in 313 AD made Christianity the national religion, he basically made it so that people wouldn't really know the difference between regeneration and citizenship, natural citizenship. And so they believe if you were born into the empire, of course, you were a Christian. That ideology made its way through Europe, made its way all the way up to our day, where even the Puritans, when they came over, kind of had a nationalistic merging of church and state kind of disposition that affected their ability to not know the difference between the two and separate it from it. And that Constantinian Christianity and culture bled into everything. That's why we talk about slavery in relation to it, because it was a part of the philosophy that was the underpillow and bed of our culture. So when you look at the Nation of Islam, particularly Elijah Muhammad in the Message to the Black Man, is constantly talking about, whether he's talking about Jesus being a black man, which we wouldn't say he was a black man in the sense that we would call someone black. White is a cultural construct, black is a cultural construct. The way we use it today. So we have to be careful of saying Jesus is West African black, like me, right? I wouldn't say that. But the Nation of Islam, because they want to be the antithesis to white supremacy, they try to color in or correct whiteness with blackness, right? That's a key point. And so instead of just saying Jesus Christ was a person of color, no, we're gonna go to the other extreme and say he's like burnished brass, which burnished brass would look like burnt orange, like a bright orange color, right? As it is in the furnace, but they say it's burnished brass, which if you understand the translation has nothing to do with that, but they use it as saying burnt, which means black. And they utilize that as a way to criticize us of covering and saying we've known this for centuries and blah, blah, blah. I can go on and on and on. But why is this important? Because the Nation of Islam has owned the narrative. They've owned the narrative of being the people who have been very, very verbal out against Christianity as its partner being what they would say is white supremacy. And so their greatest criticism of Christianity is that it's an entity of white supremacy, and they believe that Christianity was the weapon, the greatest weapon utilized against destroying the dignity of black people. And so why do we have to fight that? Because, again, those people didn't become a part of the Nation of Islam. They listened to that narrative. Like when somebody go on the internet, they may listen to Farrakhan, and they may listen to Malcolm X, and they may have listened to Clarence X, or any of those folks, or Khalid Muhammad, who was a later bloomer during the time of Farrakhan, who's passed away now. And so listening to all of those people influence you on your dignity, significance, identity. Who are you? Your identity, your significance, what's your purpose? And dignity, what's your value? They're constantly answering those three questions for black people. That's the biggest challenge that the church has to do. The church has to turn the ship of some of its missiology to engaging, fruitfully restoring the theological and practical dignity of black people in the way we do what we do. It is extremely important because the Nation of Islam, and we'll talk about it later, but all of these black power groups, or BRICS as one of our co-writers in Urban Apologetics call them, BRICS, Black Religious Identity Cults, right? Those BRICS is what we call them. Their main thing that they unify around is black identity, dignity, and significance. And that has been a huge open door for them to be able to share their gospel. I'm saying that we need to take a letter out their book, which I really believe is a letter out of the book in the Bible, of scripture, where Jesus always affirmed people's significance, dignity, and identity. It's interesting. When Jesus talked to the religious people, they didn't believe that they were sinners. So he had to show their lack without Christ, their lack of significance, their lack of dignity, their lack of identity, right? But for those who were poor, or those who were oppressed, or those who were sinners, who were already knowledgeable of their sinfulness, they didn't need Romans 3:23. They needed significance, dignity, and identity. And so that was an open door that he utilized in order to engage them with the truth of who he was. And we have to fight that, because those are the Nation of Islam's biggest tools on this. I remember going into a black bookstore, and when I talk about a black bookstore, I'm talking about a bookstore, they selling tarot cards, they selling incense, they selling shea butter, you know, shea butter, they selling cocoa butter, they're selling all different types of things. And I went in there and I started engaging a guy with the gospel. And as I began to engage him, I started using communication about significance, dignity, and identity. And I picked up a book and I said, man, it's interesting that they're still saying this. He said, what are they saying? And I started talking about the book and the fact that this was not factual about the history and nature of Christianity, but that Christianity thrived in Africa for 1,000 years, that the church fathers were and desert mothers were people of color, and started walking through that. And immediately he was sitting up. And I was saying, originally the Bible was built around our significance. The gospel redevelops and redeems our significance and identity. And as I began to do that, it began to perk up his ears and his ability to be able to hear from me and be engaged by the truth of the gospel. And so for me, that was a very, very good opening to that. And so that's the impact that the Nation of Islam has. We have to take back what God already gave us, that they have hijacked and used it in a bootleg way in order to redeem people to their cause. Nah, we need to redeem them to Christ's cause.